Okay, it's noon your time. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know a lot of you are doing this on your lunch break. Thank you so much for joining me. We are recording this, so if you would like to see it later or share it, feel free to reach out to Kristen and she will get you any information you need. Any questions you have before we get started, feel free to raise your hand, type them in the chat box. I am more than willing to answer any questions. I will also offer time for questions at the end. So don't hesitate, just shoot it up there and we can work collaboratively together. So happy Wednesday. I hope you all are well. I hope you're safe and healthy. My name is Kim Walsh, and I am the CEO, founder, and face of the brand Warrior Forward. Warrior Forward is a whole body wellness organization. We focus on nutrition, we focus on exercise, but we really have an emphasis on how nutrition and exercise impact our whole body, mind, body, spirit. So that's the vision of our brand. And Kristen asked me to get on and spend some time with you guys today talking about stress. So before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of background information about me. I worked in public education for 15 years. I was a music performance major in my undergrad and then got into education and administration. I did that for a while. I am an athlete and I've always been geared toward nutrition and wellness and whole body lifestyle. So about 6 years ago, I started my company and I've just kind of been growing it. I am a level 1 nutrition coach from Precision Nutrition. I have my personal training certification through NASM, and then I have my master's in administration, and then I work in corporate, in marketing, as well as wellness. So that's all my big specific credentials. I'm a wife, I have 2 kids, I have 3 dogs. And that's kind of where I'm at. I am out of Virginia, so we are pretty much locked down here as of about 48 hours ago. I am in my office right now, but outside of essential personnel, everybody's kind of staying put. So it's definitely a strange time, which I think is a perfect time for us to kind of get together and talk about stress and how that impacts not only our lives, but the lives of the people around us. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is stress? It seems like a really simple question. It seems kind of like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about feelings and emotions type thing. But really, if you think about it, we live in such an immediate, gratifying social media presence that we've really lost the finite definition of what stress is. So there's 4 different concepts of stress. There's cognitive stress, which could be a very negative mindset, memory issues, worrying, anxiety. There's emotional stress that could be related to depression, being moody, having irrational thoughts, being very irritable. There's physical stress, which impacts your immune system, your sleep, maybe your physical wellness, aches, pains, body issues, gut health, and then behavioral stress, which impacts your nutrition, sleeping patterns, procrastinating, anything that you cognitively do with regards to your behavior. Those 4 things are not isolated stressors. They are very much collaborative and they overlap. For example, obviously, if you're having cognitive stressors and you're worrying a lot, that leads into emotional stressors, which is causing anxiety and irritation. So they all kind of work together. When we as a society get in a stressful situation, we naturally go into a fight or flight syndrome. Everybody handles stress and anxiety differently, and there's no right or wrong way to handle it, and that's what I coach my clients, but there are good habits and not so good habits. And so we're going to talk about some of those things today. As a society, when we get stressed out, the first thing that we remove from the equation is self-care and self-health. Because when things are going wrong, when things are happening, we ultimately tend to gravitate towards helping everybody else, being the caregiver, being the provider, being the doer of all things, the mom, the dad, the partner, the spouse, the child, the friend. And so we tend to feel as if putting our self-health and our self-care as a priority is a selfish kind of act. Maybe we feel like it's silly. Maybe we feel like it's superficial. Maybe we feel as if we don't have the time, or it's not a priority right now. It's more important to be doing all of these other tasks and handling all these other things than taking time out for myself. When in fact, when we are feeling extremely stressed and when our surroundings are really stressful, which they are ultimately right now, that is when we need to have our self-care and self-health in the forefront of our mind. That is really when we need to make it a priority. Why? Because we burn out. Everybody has a burning out point. And when you get burnt out on whatever stressors it may be, you reduce productivity, you deal with all four of those cognitive, emotional, physical, behavioral stress syndromes, you have low energy, you have ultimately health issues because of it. So this is when we need to really make self-health a priority. So I'm going to give you guys an analogy, and I call it an analogy reality. And it's penguins on an iceberg. An iceberg, as all of you know, has a finite surface space. It goes deep down, but it's not necessarily very wide, depending, I mean, maybe it's huge, but it's not never ending. There are edges to it. You can only put so many penguins on the iceberg at one time without pushing off a penguin in order to bring on another penguin. So for example, all of your penguins are all of the things on your to-do list. They're all of your stressors. They're all of your action steps. They're all of your tasks and requirements. You ultimately have a finite amount of space on that iceberg to put these things before one has to be removed in order to put another one on. How do we make this work in our everyday life when it seems like the whole world is just completely a diabolical mess? Well, we prioritize, and we recognize the importance of that prioritization. We also recognize that one of those penguins on our iceberg is self-help and self-care. And when we remove that, all of these other things that we have to deal with can't be dealt with as effectively and efficiently as they normally would. So what do we do at Warrior Forward? What do we preach to our clients? What do we offer? We're all about the 4 pillars of a warrior mindset: growth, positivity, learning, and patience. And that goes directly into self-care and self-health. So I want to stop for a minute and ask all of you, feel free to participate. How are you guys dealing with what the current situation is? How many of you feel that you're more stressed out than you were 2 weeks ago? Or how many of you are struggling to find time in your day to have some self-care opportunities? So if you want to answer that question, feel free. Go ahead and put it in the chat box. This is a judgment-free zone. You can say whatever you want. You're not going to offend me in the slightest. But I really want to know, I really want to be able to address any questions that you might have. So yeah, anything that you want to share in terms of your personal stress level, feel free. When we are dealing with stress and we are dealing with how to manage it, there are obviously a few things that we want to address and offer. So for example, and some of these I'm sure many of you have heard before. Some of them I'm sure will relate to some of you. Maybe you're practicing these and then maybe it's not for you. So the very first thing I need you guys to understand about stress is you have to know yourself. You have to know your triggers. You have to know what sets you off, but then you also need to take time and figure out what resets you, what helps you reset your mind, what helps you reset your space. For me personally, I absolutely am like a napper. When the world gets crazy, I want to crawl under a fuzzy blanket and take a nap. And there was a time many, many years ago where I probably took way too many naps because I just didn't want to deal with anything. And then the other side of my stress relief is I love to go for a run. I love to go to the gym. I love to work out. So those are things that I know are my release techniques, okay? So you have to know yourself. You have to know exactly what sets you off, but you also want to know what can be helpful. Taking a bubble bath may not work for everybody. The concept of me taking a bubble bath with 2 kids running around is not like a relaxing situation in the slightest. So you have to know what works for you, and what works for you may not work for everybody else. But there are some basic things that I want to encourage and put out. I'm going to check the chats real quick. Being a businesswoman and teacher to the kids with schoolwork has been so hard, and I feel that so deeply. Even having been a teacher for 15 years, working in corporate and owning my business while now my kids are home trying to learn their work. I have a 14-year-old who's pretty self-sufficient, but I also have a 7-year-old who just has packets of worksheets. So it's not like I can really say to him, here, read this. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some tips that can help you work that out. Definitely also feel that as much as we get irritated and frustrated with the stress level, we also have a sense of gratitude and a sense of like, oh, it could be worse. But that doesn't negate your own personal frustration. So I want to start with one of the things to deal with stress is to acknowledge those feelings, is to just allow yourself a time and a space to be able to say, this sucks. This is stressful. This is crazy. Uncertain times are overwhelming, and be okay with that. I think we live in this space where a lot of times we are expected to just constantly keep it all together. Having said that, it's a very slippery slope. We don't want to unpack and move into that negative space. I mentioned one of the mindsets that we focus on is a positive mindset. We call it purposeful positivity because the reality is we aren't always going to be positive, and that's okay. But we can shift that mindset from focusing on the negative so that we don't completely move into that space and allow it to overcome us. But it is important to just allow yourself some time to be annoyed or frustrated and work out ways to get through those stressful feelings, which brings me to some suggestions and concepts. This is a time when we as businesswomen, businessmen, we thrive on structure, and we often have very specific schedules. And now suddenly all of that is out the window. So one of the things I will encourage you, and that I've encouraged my clients to do, is have a routine that's not held together with super glue. What do I mean when I say that? Understanding your own limits and boundaries and your own needs and wants. For example, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to use your school at-home schooling concept just for an example. Your kids have school. I don't know the particular situation. I have one child that does a lot of Zoom calls and one that does some other activities. So you'll have to figure out what works for you. But one of the things is you can sit down with them, work out a routine and a schedule. And it does not necessarily mean that everything has to happen during the normal school day. If you need to rearrange your day so that some of those independent educational activities are done maybe in the evening, or are done on the weekend, those are solutions that can be worked around your personal needs. Have the routine, but don't have it held together by super glue. That means we're in a space where we just have to accept the uncertainty and learn to adapt. So what went well on Monday may not go well on Tuesday. That's okay. And we just figure it out and roll on. Another way to really help relieve stress is water. And I know it sounds so ridiculous, but it's just so true. Drinking and fueling your body with water is a really important scientific necessity. We tend to, when we get stressed, lean towards sugars, alcohols, fast food, or we go the other way and maybe we're not eating as much, maybe we have an upset stomach or a nervous stomach, so we're not drinking as much. One of those extremes is usually where 90% of the human population falls, which is a huge percent of how people deal with stress. So one of the things you can do to kind of just keep your body functioning and flowing at its peak capacity is drinking water. If you don't like the taste of water, there's a ton of different ways that you can get around that. I had a girlfriend recently was teaching some clients how to freeze fruit into the ice cube trays, and that helps diffuse your water. I am a fan of Mio. I buy them at the grocery store. They're like $2 or $3. I put some in that. Fresh mint. You can put your fresh fruit right in the water. You can mix it. I sometimes will do the ice, which is like ICE, the like calorie-free sparkling water, and I'll mix it with regular water, so I'm still getting that plain water. But water is really important. It's really important in how our body processes foods. It's really important in how our body processes cortisol levels, which tend to be very high when we're stressed out. And it's also just really a way to have some sense of routine, believe it or not. If you are used to drinking 8 glasses of water a day, and your routine throughout the day is thrown off, but you maintain that one consistent thing, you will feel really good about the fact that that's your one consistent thing you can count on. The other thing that I encourage everybody to do right now is to get some movement in. I know that's really hard because we're on all kinds of restrictions. I don't know what it is specifically out there. Here in Virginia, it's 10 or less people, and a lot of places are closed. But any kind of movement, it does not have to be, you know, a dripping in sweat beach body workout. However, if that's what you absolutely love, that's awesome. But you could just walk up and down your street. You could, you know, take a bike ride. Anything for 30 minutes. It gets your blood circulating. It gets your, it helps with your cortisol levels, which again, they will go up naturally when you are stressed. It's a release of endorphins. It also helps circulate all that water that you just drank, and it will help you sleep better. So those are all things that are going to ultimately hit you up on the back end of having good cognitive, emotional, behavioral health. Let's see. Using motivational bottles saved me. Oh, I love those. I've bought them for my clients as gift. You can get them on Amazon. And in fact, I'll link in my website for you guys because I think that I have the attachment. But you can get them on Amazon. They can come in a half gallon, quarter gallon, gallon, and they have times and little motivational quotes, and it kind of just helps you measure out your day. I have a blender bottle, and I know I fill this up 6 times a day, and that's a gallon of water for me, which is what I'm used to. And I keep myself pretty much on track that way. But you would think it's so simple and it's really not that big of a deal, but it truly, truly is really beneficial to your emotional and physical well-being. Let's see what else. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat box, raise your hand if you have any questions. Overall, when you're dealing with stress, like I said, you have to know your own personal needs. You have to know what works for you. It's important to know not only what works for you, but in this situation where a lot of us are stuck in our homes with our families and our loved ones, we also want to be mindful of what might work for them, especially if you have kids. If you have children, we are now navigating this weird space of being a parent, being a business person, being a business owner, working in corporate. Now we're homeschool teachers and all of these things. And yet we're still having to try and explain to our kids why they can't have play dates, why they aren't in school. If you have kids that are hitting milestones this year, you know, they're grieving the loss of that. Like, for example, we have seniors here in Virginia that aren't graduating and they're not having prom. And it's just, you know, a sad time for them. So we're navigating this whole new area. And it's really important that not only we know what our triggers are and how to release our own stress, but it's important that we are cognitive of what their triggers are. And to understand that allowing a little bit of flexibility is okay. What do I mean by that? If you are modeling good stressor behavior, and I mean, when I say good stressor behavior, I'm meaning you're using stressors to your advantage to respond in a positive manner. If you're modeling that for your kids, for your spouse, for your neighbors, ultimately they will pick up on that. So it's a really big teachable moment. For example, if you know that you need a timeout, I tell my kids all the time, I'm putting myself in timeout, I need 5 minutes, set the timer, don't talk to me for 5 minutes. Sometimes throughout that conversation, you're able to then say to your children, do you need a 5-minute timeout? It's not a punishment. It is a space away. If you know that you need that exercise and that movement to help you combat stir craziness or just get some extra energy out, you know, invite your kids to join you, invite your spouse to join you. Again, it doesn't have to be a full body workout. You could just go for a walk. So the whole idea behind stress in this situation is that I want you to think of yourself as like a skyscraper. So skyscrapers are built to handle stress. They are built to be sturdy and withstand the elements, and they are built to stand tall under massive amounts of stress. If you've ever been in a skyscraper, you know that they actually move. There's wavelengths that are involved. I'm not even going to go into the science behind it. But skyscrapers have the flexibility to sway back and forth. The reason that they do this is because they are built in a certain way that allows them to be a little bit flexible. So if you have this skyscraper mentality, you are built to be your best self under stress. You're built for the elements. You just have to figure out how to manage them. So as we move forward into this uncertain time, you know, again, what may work for you today may not work for you tomorrow. But I know that Kristen is offering you guys some upcoming activities and events. I encourage you to take part in them because, again, meditation, yoga, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral conversations, journaling, all of those things are stress relievers, and they help us to recognize what we need. And they also help us to release some of those stressors that we're struggling with. So does anybody have any questions about anything specific, nutrition-based, exercise, behavioral-based? And definitely want to provide you with as much applicable information as I can. When it comes to nutrition, I will say as much whole foods as you can, meaning keeping foods that are on the outside of the grocery store. I know I don't know how it is there, but meats are really hard to get here right now in Virginia. I have a lot of clients that are struggling to find certain meats. You know, again, you have a plan and a routine, but it's not helped by super glue. So if you can't find ground chicken, you work with what you can, and control, you know, focus on controlling what you can control. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm going to put into the chat. This is the website for Warrior Forward, just to give you guys a little information. There's a weekly newsletter coming out right now. If you go to the website and subscribe, there's free at-home workouts that we're linking in. There's free recipes. There's all kinds of resources and information that can help with your kids and their educational needs. You just subscribe for the weekly newsletter. And then there's also a blog on there. All nutritional services for Warrior Forward, I have decided for the month of April, they are free. So everything is pro bono. If you want to get started on your wellness with nutrition, send me an email. I would love to have a consult with you. I'm doing a 30-day April challenge, completely free. You get a custom workout plan. It is quarantine friendly, so if you're in a space where they don't have certain produce due to limitations, we work around that. And it's not based on diet and fads. Thank you. So yeah, that's going on every month. We have a news you can use newsletter that has a lot. It's a little more in depth. It has links. I know the water bottle was linked on there. I know that we've had, you know, leggings that I really like that are linked on there, other brands that I work with. We are really working hard. Our team is in full speed trying to provide everyone things that they need, especially people that are now homeschooling, resources that you guys can use that are being provided for free, motivational resources. We're doing a lot of giveaways. We're doing a lot of just drawings for participation. We really just want to be able to serve you in any capacity possible. So when Kristen reached out, I was 100%, I wanted to give you some education on stress and stress relief, but I also want to be able to provide you with anything you may need in the future. What is your recommendation in discipline? It's so hard. I'm going to be really honest. Go on in light of it. I'm stressed for little ones. So I think I'm going to tell you what I've told some of my other clients, as well as a conversation my husband and I have had with our own kids. Again, routine. I have 2 children that absolutely thrive on routine. They really struggle when they don't have that. And they're both very social, so they are struggling with the lack of social. So we've had to kind of think outside the box, and we've set up FaceTime calls with their friends. We've set up Zoom calls with the neighbors. They've played, you know, Uno on Zoom, just to kind of allow them some time. It also gives us as their parents a little bit of break. When it comes to discipline, here's what I would say right now. You have to have your standard. And when I feel really strongly about routines, and because of that, there is a standard of behavior that is non-negotiable in our house. At the same time, kids, especially kids under the age of 10 that don't have the cognitive development yet to be able to really express what's going on or to even understand what's going on, you have to be a little bit gentle, and I would encourage a little bit of patience. That's where the lack of super glue comes in, because a lot of time kids are acting out because they're frustrated, but they don't have the cognitive ability to articulate what they're frustrated with. And they certainly, if we as adults are struggling to wrap our head around what is going on, is absolutely a struggle for a 6 or 7-year-old. What I do encourage is before, and I did this in my classroom, I did this in a lot of my coaching with other teachers, is use the teachable moment before you use the discipline. So what I mean by that is consequences come with behavior. Consequence doesn't always mean a negative thing. You can have a positive consequence. You can have a positive result or a positive outcome from something. So I would reframe consequences. If they need discipline in some regard, like if they're just totally off the rails, they can have consequences, but there's also teachable moments in there. There's times where, and this is when I go back to what I was talking to a minute ago about knowing their triggers, times when you know your children, either they're just having a rough day or they're just being completely defiant. And that's where you as a parent have to come in and know your child and know what they're dealing with. But there's always opportunity to step back from a disciplinary state and talk about it and ask questions. I'm always, even with my coaching and adults with nutrition, I'm always the 3 why step, so I ask why 3 times. So why did you hit Susie? Because she was being mean. Why? Because she wanted to play with someone else. Why? Because, and you get to those really the root of the problem, and then you're kind of able to talk about how they can do other things. You're welcome, absolutely. And I'll share my email too, and because I have no problem if you guys want to email me or if you think of stuff later. So when it comes to discipline, I think at this time we have to walk a fine line. I think discipline is important, but I think education is more important. And I think if you're educating your children on the same thing that we're sitting here talking about today, in relating it in a way that's appropriate for them, but you're educating them on stress and coping skills and self-health and self-coping and adaptability and all of these things that I literally am sitting here talking to you about. You can play it down for your kids. I think that's more important than just getting into the reactionary discipline, if that answers your question. Hopefully it did. In terms of screen time, I'll give you a little background information. Virginia, 2 weeks ago, they did 2 weeks no school first. So we, as a society and community here, thought, oh, well, we just have this 2-week weirdness and then everything's going to go back to normal. I don't know what we were thinking, but that's what everybody was thinking. So initially, I was like, no, routines stayed the same. Then at one point, my husband did have to come to me and say, like, okay, well, this is, you have to pick your battles. So here's what I would say. If you're looking for structure and routine, which I think all kids are desperately in need of, whether they want to admit it or not, I pick your battle. So for example, in our house, there's no Xbox Sunday night through Thursday night. So what we consider school nights, they're not allowed to have Xbox. But if the kids want to sit down with us and watch something together, they do that. Where normally we don't necessarily allow a lot of screen time during the week. Mostly my kids don't have time for it. But obviously their extracurriculars are canceled also. So we have allowed more screen time, but we are also monitoring that screen time. But we have also still kept a precedence of this is a house rule and we don't do, Xbox games on a school night. So, I mean, you kind of can work out what works for your kids, what their triggers are, and so on and so forth. We have been flexible. I would encourage you to be flexible with playtime because, listen, I have an education degree and 15 years experience, and I am struggling to homeschool my own children. It's just a totally different situation, and I feel for people that truly don't have that background knowledge, and especially, like I said, if you're dealing with a 6 or 7-year-old that is just learning to read, they can't just sit for an hour and do an activity independently on a piece of paper. They're literally needing somebody to help them, and you're still working. So I would say, a lot of states, find out what your state and what your school is doing in terms of pass-fail with relative to grades. I have a daughter who's going into high school. Her grading situation is obviously a little bit different than my son going on into second grade. But make sure, you know, they're keeping up with their activities. They're getting on Zoom calls, or they're getting on Google Classroom if they're supposed to, and they're participating. But if you have to take breaks in a day and allow them to go play, or get on, you know, screen time, but it's an educational app or it's an educational program, I say go for it, because right now, you know, we're just trying to deal with all of this stress, and I think holding yourself to this like normal standard when things are anything but normal is only going to add more stress. So figure out what works for your kids and what works for your family. I wouldn't encourage putting them in front of the television for 15 hours. You know, that's going to be counterproductive on the back end. So you still want to front load, you know, certain routines, certain procedures, because ultimately we're going to come out of this. Ultimately, our kids are going to have to go back to school. Ultimately, we're going to go back to the office, and we're going to have to retransition back into what that normal looks like. So I would try and keep some kind of routine, you know, your kids getting up, getting dressed, brushing teeth, having breakfast. Maybe they don't do it every day, but maybe they do it most days. Because I think that really speaks volumes into how we feel, and how we feel is directly related to that self-health, self-care. Even with children, I mean, you have a child that's been in pajamas for 4 days, they're probably not going to feel as great as if they got up and got dressed and had some fresh air. Yeah, totally, I agree with you. Separating some of the educational tools. I'll tell you, and I will, if you go to, if you're on Facebook, there is a website, actually I can find it and put it in the link, that I've shared with a lot of my clients, that is all of these educational resources and games that are free right now, and usually they cost money, and a lot of them are very game related. I know my son just feels like he's playing a computer game, so I can put that link up for you. But yeah, anything at this point that I think will help limit the levels of stress that you have is going to ultimately trickle down into your family and the people that you're surrounding yourself with. So take some time. I would encourage you tonight, after we've had this, you know, chat, take some time and think about what are the positive ways that you handle stress, and what are maybe the negative ways that you handle stress. You can make them on a piece of paper. I've done it where I literally folded a piece of paper in half and did 2 columns, because putting it down on paper will help you recognize what those things are. But it also allows you to kind of reflect back and make some decisions on how you want to move forward, and maybe what you want to address as you continue to work on your self-help, self-care. And it's an ongoing thing, like truly. It's a lifelong process. I'm going to put this spreadsheet, bear with me. Hopefully this works for you guys. This is the online spreadsheet. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I didn't send it to everyone. Just one second. Okay, there. That's the online spreadsheet that has a lot of resources. Usually they charge, read the fine print. I don't know on all of them. I can't speak to whether they're like free for 30 days or 3 months or whatever, but there's a ton of stuff. Hopefully the link works, and you can check those out, and they may have some beneficial things for you. Feel free to share them. Also, this is my email, warriorforward17@gmail.com. If you want to email me if you have questions later, You can also email me directly through the website, warriorforward.com. Again, if you want to get on the 30-day nutrition challenge, it's totally free. We are updating the website. I will give you a heads up right now. It says it was $100. So my web designer is updating that. It's completely free. I'm doing all of my services are free for the month of April. My paying clients have had their accounts frozen. It's just something that I felt needed to be done. I want to be able to serve you guys and help you guys in any way that I can. And right now I'm not really concerned about adding additional financial stress to people. So no worries there. Does anybody have any more questions, or did I answer? I'm trying to scroll back. Did I answer everybody's question? Ultimately, I encourage you to participate in the events that Kristen has coming up. I know some of the people that are going to be hosting them. They're incredible, incredible human beings, tons of knowledge. I would encourage you to encourage others to participate. I think as much as we sometimes take webinars as like another thing we have to do, this is a time where they can truly be beneficial, truly be educational. You never really know what you're going to get, and really it's ultimately going to help you and benefit you and your long-term health, which is paramount right now, because as the doer of all things, it is important that we are taking care of ourselves. It's very much like the airplane. Put your own mask on first before you help someone else. So any of the analogies that I've shared, feel free to keep in the forefront of your mind, but I'm here for you guys. Anything you need, let me know. And truly take some time to figure out what are the ways that you deal with stress best. You can model those, include your family, and I have no doubts we are all going to get through this and continue to warrior forward. And I thank you guys so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. And I'm so, so happy to have had you here and had this opportunity. And if that is it, thank you. Thanks, you guys. Please reach out if you have any questions. Like, please reach out. Kristen knows how to get a hold of me if you think of something later, or if you want some additional information. I have loads of resources, so don't hesitate. Reach out. Stay safe, stay well. Thank you guys so much.